There was a season in my life where something kept happening that I couldn't ignore. I would wake up suddenly. No alarm, no noise, just my eyes opening between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. At first, I thought it was random. Maybe I slept too early. Maybe it was stress. But then it kept happening. Again and again. Same time window. And what made it even stranger wasn't just waking up. It was how I felt. Alert, aware. Almost like my mind had been pulled out of sleep instead of naturally waking up. I remember lying there in the silence, looking around, trying to understand why my body kept doing this. There was no clear reason, no physical disturbance. But internally, something felt active, and I wasn't the only one experiencing this. I started hearing the same thing from others. I always wake up around 3 a.m. It's like something just wakes me up. I can't go back to sleep after that. Different people, same pattern. That's when I stopped seeing it as coincidence. Because when something repeats like that, there's always a reason. At that time in my life, I believed everything had a deeper meaning. Nothing was random. Everything was connected to something unseen, something influencing what we experience without us realizing it. So I started looking for answers there. But here's what I didn't understand back then. The cause wasn't what I thought. It wasn't something external waking me up. It wasn't something happening around me. It was something happening within me. Something my body and mind were doing consistently, at the same time every night. And once I finally understood what was really going on, that mysterious wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. stopped being confusing. It became clear, predictable, and most importantly, something I could actually control. After this kept happening, I started paying attention to one thing. What was different about those nights? At first, nothing stood out. Same routine, same environment. But then I noticed something subtle. It wasn't about what was happening outside. It was about what was happening before I went to sleep. The nights I woke up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. had one thing in common. My mind wasn't fully settled. Maybe I had been thinking too much. Maybe something was left unresolved. Maybe there was a quiet tension I didn't deal with. Nothing dramatic. Just small, unfinished mental activity. And that's what I didn't understand before. Your body doesn't just sleep, it processes. While you're asleep, your mind is still active in the background, going through everything you carried into the night. Thoughts, emotions, stress, all of it. And here's the key. If something is unresolved, your mind keeps working on it. That's what was happening. I wasn't waking up randomly. My mind was reaching a point where that internal activity became strong enough to bring me out of sleep. Almost like a checkpoint, a moment where the system pauses and says, there's still something active here. I experienced this clearly. The more I went to sleep with unfinished thoughts or mental tension, the more likely I was to wake up in that exact time window, and the more peaceful and clear my mind was before sleep, the less it happened. That pattern was consistent. At the time, I thought something deeper was causing it. But later, I understood something simple. Your sleep reflects your mental state, and if your mind is still active, your sleep won't be continuous. It will be interrupted. That's the real reason your body wakes you up. Not because something external is pulling you out of sleep, but because something internal hasn't settled yet. What made this experience feel mysterious wasn't just waking up, it was the timing. Why that exact window? Why not midnight or 6 a.m.? Why always between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.? That question stayed with me for a long time, until I started noticing something about how sleep actually works. Your sleep isn't one continuous state, it moves in cycles, deeper phases, lighter phases, and moments where your body naturally comes closer to waking. And that 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. window, it's one of the lightest points in your sleep cycle. Your body is no longer in its deepest rest. Your mind becomes more active again. Your awareness starts to rise slightly. You're not fully asleep, but not fully awake either. That's the key, because in that state, anything that is still active in your mind becomes more noticeable. Unfinished thoughts, stress, mental tension, things that were quiet earlier in the night now come closer to the surface. That's why this time feels different. You're more aware, more sensitive, more likely to wake up if something is still unresolved internally. I experienced this clearly. On nights when my mind was calm, even during that lighter phase, I stayed asleep. But on nights when something was still active, that's when I would wake up, not because something external triggered it, but because my mind reached a level of activity that crossed into awareness. That's why the timing feels so specific. It's not random, it's part of your natural sleep rhythm. And when that rhythm meets an active mind, you wake up. Once I understood this, the mystery started to disappear. Because it wasn't about something happening to me at that time. It was about what was already happening within me reaching the surface at that exact point in my sleep cycle. When I started talking to others about this, I noticed something important. Almost everyone made the same mistake the moment they woke up. They reacted instantly. The second their eyes opened, their mind started moving. Why am I awake? What time is it? I need to go back to sleep. And then it escalated. They picked up their phone, checked the time, scrolled, started thinking even more. And just like that, their mind went from half asleep to fully active. I used to do the same thing. The moment I woke up, I would engage with the situation. I would try to fix it by forcing myself back to sleep. But the more I tried, the more awake I became. That's the mistake. Because the moment you react mentally, you increase activity. and increased activity makes it harder to fall back asleep. I realized something simple but powerful. Waking up is not the problem. What you do next is. There were nights when I woke up and stayed still. No sudden thoughts, no movement, no checking the time. And something surprising happened. I drifted back to sleep naturally. But on nights when I reacted, even slightly, sleep became difficult because I had already activated my mind. That's what most people don't understand. When you wake up in that 3 a.m., 5 a.m. window, your mind is in a sensitive state. It can either settle back into sleep or fully wake up, and your reaction decides which direction it goes. That's why this mistake is so important, because it turns a temporary awakening into a full interruption of your rest. It's not the waking up that causes the problem. It's what happens in the seconds after. The first time I broke this pattern, it wasn't by forcing sleep. It was by doing something very simple. Nothing. When I woke up in that 3 a.m., 5 a.m. window, I didn't react. I didn't check the time. I didn't move. I didn't start thinking about anything. I stayed completely still. At first, it felt unnatural because your instinct is to do something, to fix it, to go back to sleep. But that instinct is what activates your mind. So instead, I focused on one thing: my breathing. Slow, natural, unforced. I let my body stay exactly as it was. No tension, no urgency. And something interesting happened. The awareness that woke me up started fading. My mind, which was close to waking up fully, slowed down again. And without forcing anything, I drifted back into sleep. That's when I realized something powerful. You don't need to go back to sleep. You need to avoid waking up completely. That's the difference. Because once your mind fully activates, sleep becomes difficult. But if you stay in that in between state, sleep returns naturally. That's why the first thing you must do is simple. Stay still. Don't engage. Don't react. Don't think ahead. Just allow your body to remain in that relaxed state. Because your body already knows how to sleep. You don't have to force it. You just have to stop interrupting it. That's the first step. And it alone can break the cycle for most people. Not by doing more, but by doing less at the exact moment it matters most. The second thing I discovered was just as important as staying still. And it's something most people get wrong. When they wake up, they try to control their thoughts. They tell themselves, stop thinking. They try to force their mind to be quiet. But that doesn't work. Because the moment you try to control your thoughts, you're already thinking. And that keeps your mind active. I used to fall into that same trap. I would lie there trying to silence my mind, trying to make myself sleep again. But all that did was create more effort, more tension, more awareness, until I understood something simple. You don't calm your mind by controlling it. You calm it by giving it something soft to follow. That's when I shifted my focus. Instead of fighting my thoughts, I gently placed my attention on something neutral: my breathing, the feeling of my body resting, the rhythm of my chest rising and falling. Nothing complicated, nothing intense, just something steady. And what happened was subtle, but powerful. My thoughts didn't disappear instantly, but they slowed down. They became less important, less loud, because my attention was no longer feeding them. That's the key. Your mind follows where your attention goes. If your attention is on thoughts, they grow. If your attention is on something calm, your mind settles. I experienced this again and again. The more gently I redirected my focus, the easier it became to drift back into sleep. No force, no struggle, just a gradual return. That's the second thing you must do. Not control your mind, but guide it. Because when your mind is guided into calmness, your body naturally follows, and sleep returns without effort. The third thing I learned was something I never expected. Your body plays just as big a role as your mind, because even if your thoughts are calm, if your body becomes active, sleep disappears. I noticed this clearly. The moment I adjusted too much, the moment I reached for my phone, even the moment I sat up, my body shifted into awake mode. And once that happened, it was difficult to go back. That's when I understood something simple. Your body has two states: rest and alertness. And small movements can switch between them instantly. So instead of moving, I did something different. I stayed exactly where I was, but I relaxed deeper, not physically moving, but mentally releasing any tension I was holding: my shoulders, my jaw, my forehead. I would scan my body gently and let everything soften. No effort, just awareness. And as my body relaxed further, something surprising happened. The feeling of being awake started to fade, because my body was sending a different signal, a signal of rest. And your mind follows that signal. That's the connection most people miss. They think sleep is only mental, but it's physical too. If your body feels awake, your mind stays awake. If your body feels deeply relaxed, your mind returns to sleep. That's why this third step matters so much. You don't need to move. You don't need to adjust everything. You just need to release tension without action. Because the deeper your body relaxes, the easier it is for your mind to let go. And when both align, sleep happens naturally. That's the final piece. Not forcing sleep, but creating the conditions where it returns on its own. After practicing these three steps consistently, something became very clear to me. They work because they don't fight the process. Most people try to force sleep. They try to control it, chase it, or fix it the moment it breaks. But sleep doesn't respond to force. It responds to conditions. And when you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., those conditions are already fragile. Your mind is in between states. Your body is lightly resting. It can go either way, back into sleep or fully into wakefulness. And what you do in those few moments decides everything. These three steps work because they protect the sleep state instead of interrupting it. When you stay still, you prevent your body from switching into alertness. When you calm your mind gently, you avoid activating thought patterns that pull you into full awareness. When you relax your body deeper, you send a signal that reinforces rest. It's all aligned. Nothing conflicts with sleep. That's why it feels effortless. I tested this many times. On nights when I followed these steps, I would return to sleep quickly. But on nights when I broke even one of them, checked the time, moved too much, or started thinking heavily, I would stay awake. The difference was always the same. Not external conditions, not the time, just my response. That's when I realized something powerful. Waking up isn't the problem. Losing the sleep state is. And these three steps prevent that from happening. They keep you in that in between space where sleep can naturally pull you back. That's why they work every time. Not because they force sleep, but because they stop you from pushing it away. Once I started applying these steps consistently, something changed that I didn't expect. It wasn't just about going back to sleep, it was about control. For the first time, I wasn't confused or frustrated when I woke up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. I understood it. And because I understood it, I could respond differently. That alone removed the stress. Before, waking up felt like a problem. Something was wrong, something needed to be fixed. But now, it felt neutral. Just a moment in the night, and that shift made everything easier. Because stress is what keeps you awake the longest. Once that stress is gone, your body relaxes faster, your mind settles quicker, and sleep returns naturally. But there was something even deeper I noticed. My overall sleep improved. Not just those moments in the middle of the night, but the entire night. Because I stopped fighting the process. I stopped reacting with urgency, and that created a more stable sleep pattern. I also started waking up with more clarity, less grogginess, less mental noise, because my sleep was no longer being interrupted by stress and overreaction. That's the real benefit. It's not just about fixing one moment, it's about changing your entire relationship with sleep. You go from feeling powerless to feeling in control. And once you have that control, the fear of waking up disappears because you know exactly what to do. And when you remove fear, tension, and confusion, sleep becomes natural again. That's what happens when you master this. Not just better nights, but a calmer, clearer experience every time you rest. If you take one thing from everything I've shared, let it be this. Waking up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. is not random, and it's not something to fear. It's a moment where your mind is in a sensitive state and your response determines what happens next. That's it. No mystery, no confusion. Just a system that reacts to how you behave in that moment. And now you know exactly what to do. Stay still. Calm your mind gently. Relax your body without moving. These 3 steps are simple, but they are powerful when applied correctly because they protect your sleep instead of interrupting it. They keep you in that state where sleep can naturally return without force, without struggle, and most importantly, without panic. The next time you wake up in that window, don't rush, don't panic, don't try to fix it immediately. Just pause and follow what you now understand. Because awareness changes everything. What once felt confusing now becomes predictable, and what once felt uncontrollable becomes something you can manage with clarity. You don't need to fight the night. You just need to understand how to move through it. And once you do, sleep becomes something you can trust again. Simple, natural, restful. That's the truth behind those early morning awakenings. And now you have the power to handle them.